The mud sucked at her skirts with such force that Hannah Bellamy thought it might pull her straight down to hell itself, and she screamed into the relentless downpour as her wagon lay overturned behind her. The horses long since bolted into the storm-darkened afternoon. It was April of 1878, and the spring rains had turned the road leading into Jordan Valley, Oregon, into a treacherous river of thick, clinging mud that seemed determined to claim her life. Hannah had been traveling alone, foolishly perhaps, but she had little choice after her employer in Boise City had dismissed her from her position as a governess with barely enough money for passage to her aunt's home further west. The wagon she had hired was old, the driver unreliable, and when the wheel had caught in a rut and splintered apart, he had taken both horses and abandoned her without a backward glance. Now she was waist-deep in mud that felt like cold, grasping hands, and her strength was fading fast. She had tried to pull herself toward the roadside, toward the scrubby grass and rocks that promised solid ground, but every movement only seemed to drag her deeper. Her arms ached, her legs had gone numb from the cold, and her sodden dress weighed what felt like 100 pounds. The rain pelted her face, mixing with tears she refused to acknowledge, and for the first time in her 22 years, Hannah Bellamy truly believed she was going to die. Then she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats, steady and sure despite the treacherous conditions. "Hold on." The voice cut through the rain like a lifeline, deep and commanding, and Hannah lifted her head to see a rider approaching on a sturdy bay horse that picked its way carefully through the mire. The man swung down from his saddle before the horse had fully stopped, his boots hitting the muddy ground with a splash. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark oilskin coat that shed the rain, and beneath the brim of his hat, Hannah caught a glimpse of a strong jaw and eyes that assessed the situation with quick intelligence. "Do not move," he said, his voice calmer now but no less authoritative. "The more you struggle, the deeper you will sink." "I have been trying not to move for the past 10 minutes, Hannah managed through chattering teeth, "but the mud does not seem to care." Despite the dire circumstances, she saw his mouth quirk slightly. "Fair point, miss. I am going to get my rope. Just stay as still as you can." He moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving a coiled rope from his saddle and testing its strength with a sharp tug. His movements were economical, purposeful, like a man who had faced trouble before and knew exactly how to handle it. He tied one end around his saddle horn, then fashioned a loop in the other end. "I am going to toss this to you," he said, moving as close to the edge of the mud as he dared. "When you catch it, slip it under your arms and hold tight. My horse will do most of the work, but you need to try to keep your body as horizontal as possible." "Can you do that?" Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. She was shaking so hard now that she feared she might not be able to hold onto anything, but she would try. She had to try. The rope sailed through the rain on his first throw, and Hannah grabbed for it with numb fingers. It slipped through her grasp, and she bit back a sob of frustration. The man reeled it back in without comment, and on his second throw, she managed to catch it and hold on. "Good," he said, his voice carrying approval that warmed her more than it should have. "Now get it under your arms, that is it. Hold the rope in front of you with both hands. Ready?" "Yes," Hannah whispered. He whistled to his horse a sharp command, and the animal began to back up steadily. The rope went taut, biting into Hannah's ribs even through the layers of her clothing, and then she felt the mud's grip begin to loosen. It was agonizing, like being pulled apart, and she cried out as the suction released her legs with a terrible squelching sound. But she was moving, sliding across the surface of the mud, and then the ground beneath her began to feel more solid. The cowboy had waded in as far as he safely could, and when she was close enough, he reached down and grasped her arms, hauling her up onto firmer ground with strength that seemed effortless. For a moment, they both stood there in the pouring rain, his hands still gripping her arms, and Hannah looked up into the face of the man who had just saved her life. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead beneath his hat, and his eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, like sage after rain. There was mud splattered across his angular face, and concern etched in the lines around his eyes as he studied her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Hannah tried to answer, but now that the immediate danger had passed, the cold and shock hit her all at once. Her legs buckled, and she would have gone down if he had not caught her, sweeping her up into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. "I have got you," he said quietly. "You are safe now." Those words, spoken with such simple certainty, broke something loose inside Hannah. She turned her face against his shoulder and let herself shake, let herself feel the terror that she had been holding at bay. He did not tell her to stop or to be brave. He simply carried her to his horse and somehow managed to mount while still holding her, settling her across his lap like a child. "There is a ranch house about a mile up the road," he said, adjusting his coat to shield her somewhat from the rain. "They will give us shelter until this storm passes. Can you hold on for that long?" Hannah nodded against his chest, not trusting herself to speak. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, strong and reassuring, and the warmth of his body was beginning to seep through her cold, soaked clothing. His arm around her was like iron, holding her secure, and for the first time since the wagon had overturned, she felt safe. The ride to the ranch house passed in a blur of rain and cold, and the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them. Hannah drifted in and out of awareness, rousing herself enough to note that the cowboy kept up a steady stream of quiet talk to his horse, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through his chest. She caught words here and there. "Steady, almost there, good boy." It was oddly comforting. The ranch house appeared through the rain like a beacon, warm light glowing in the windows. The cowboy guided his horse right up to the covered porch and dismounted with Hannah still in his arms. He kicked at the door with his boot, calling out, "Hello, the house. We need help." The door swung open almost immediately, revealing a weathered woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that took in the situation at a glance. "Good Lord, get that girl inside. Marcus Connor, what have you dragged in this time? Found her stuck in the mud down the road, Mrs. Patterson," the cowboy said as he carried Hannah inside. So his name was Marcus Connor. "Her wagon overturned. Set her down by the fire," Mrs. Patterson commanded, already moving toward the back of the house. "I will get blankets and hot water. Jim," this last was called up the stairs. "Jim, get down here and see to Marcus's horse." A teenage boy appeared and hurried out into the rain without needing to be told twice. Marcus set Hannah down carefully in a chair near the large fireplace, where a good fire was crackling. She had not realized how cold she was until she felt the heat against her skin, and she began shaking again, convulsively this time. "We need to get you out of these wet clothes," Mrs. Patterson said, returning with an armload of quilts and what looked like a flannel nightgown. She shot Marcus a pointed look. "That means you make yourself scarce, young man." "Yes, madam," Marcus said. He looked down at Hannah and his expression was concerned. "You are in good hands now. Mrs. Patterson will take care of you." Hannah found her voice at last, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Thank you. You saved my life." Something flickered in his eyes, some emotion she could not quite name. "Could not very well leave you there," he said, almost gruffly. Then he touched the brim of his hat and disappeared toward what she assumed was the kitchen, leaving her in Mrs. Patterson's capable hands. The older woman helped Hannah strip off her sodden clothes, clucking her tongue at the state of them, and the way Hannah's skin had gone pale with cold. She wrapped her in quilts and settled her closer to the fire, then brought her a cup of hot broth that Hannah had to hold with both hands to keep from spilling. "Drink slowly," Mrs. Patterson instructed. "You have had quite a shock. That mud on the Jordan Valley Road has claimed more than one life over the years. You are lucky Marcus came along when he did." "Very lucky," Hannah agreed. The hot broth was beginning to restore some feeling to her limbs, though everything ached fiercely. "Does he work for you, Marcus?" "No, he has his own place about 5 miles north of here. Runs cattle, does some horse trading. Good man, one of the best around these parts." Mrs. Patterson studied her with open curiosity. "Where were you headed when your wagon turned over?" "Jordan Valley," Hannah said. "My aunt lives there, Clara Martin. Do you know her?" Mrs. Patterson's face lit up. "Know Clara Martin? Of course I do. She runs the boarding house in town. Lovely woman. She is expecting you then." "Yes, I sent her a letter several weeks ago telling her I would be arriving around this time." "I was dismissed from my position in Boise City," Hannah explained, feeling the familiar sting of shame at the memory. "The family decided they no longer needed a governess." She did not add that it was because the eldest son, home from college, had developed an unwanted interest in her, and his mother had blamed Hannah for it. Such things were always the woman's fault. Never mind that Hannah had done nothing to encourage his attention and everything to discourage it. "Well, you will be safe with Clara," Mrs. Patterson said warmly. "But you cannot go anywhere tonight, not in this storm and not in your condition. You will stay here, get a good night's rest, and we will see about getting you to town tomorrow." "I do not want to impose," Hannah began, but Mrs. Patterson waved her objection away. "Nonsense. We have plenty of room, and it is no imposition at all. Besides, Marcus will want to make sure you are fully recovered before he lets you go anywhere." She said this with a knowing smile that made Hannah's cheeks flush. "He does not even know me," Hannah protested. "Marcus Connor takes his responsibilities seriously," Mrs. Patterson said. "He pulled you out of that mud, which means he feels responsible for seeing you safe to your destination. You will see." She was right. When Marcus returned from wherever he had been, his hair now dry and curling slightly at his collar, his first question was about Hannah's condition. "She is warming up nicely," Mrs. Patterson reported. "A good night's sleep and some hot food in her belly, and she will be right as rain. Speaking of which, you should stay as well, Marcus. That storm is only getting worse." Marcus glanced toward the window where rain was still lashing against the glass. "I suppose you are right. I do not fancy riding through that again if I do not have to." "Good. I will set another place for supper. Hannah, do you feel up to eating at the table, or should I bring you a tray?" Hannah was about to say she would take a tray when Marcus spoke up. "If she feels strong enough, it might do her good to move around a bit, but only if she is up to it." There was something in the way he said it, a note of concern that was not quite professional courtesy, that made Hannah look at him more carefully. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 27 or 28, with the weathered look of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. He had strong features, not handsome in the conventional sense, but arresting. There was character in his face, a kind of quiet strength that made her feel safe just looking at him. "I can manage the table," Hannah said, clutching the quilts around her. "But I should put on some proper clothes first." Mrs. Patterson shooed Marcus away again and helped Hannah into the borrowed nightgown and wrapper, both far too large but blessedly warm and dry. Her own clothes were hung near the fire to dry, though Hannah suspected they were ruined beyond repair. Everything she had owned had been in that wagon, and the thought of what she had lost made her throat tight. "Do not worry about that now," Mrs. Patterson said, reading her expression with uncanny accuracy. "One problem at a time. Tomorrow we will see what can be salvaged." Supper was a simple but hearty affair. Beef stew with vegetables, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Mr. Patterson, a quiet man with kind eyes, arrived home just as they were sitting down, and his wife quickly explained the situation. He nodded at Hannah with gentle sympathy and shook Marcus's hand with obvious respect. "Good thing you came along," he said. "That is a bad stretch of road in weather like this." "Just fortunate timing," Marcus said, but Hannah noticed he did not quite meet Mr. Patterson's eyes when he said it. Throughout the meal, Hannah found her gaze drifting to Marcus. He had good manners, she noticed, and he listened more than he spoke. When he did talk, it was with a quiet thoughtfulness that suggested he considered his words carefully. He asked her a few polite questions about her journey and her plans in Jordan Valley, and he seemed genuinely interested in her answers. "Your aunt will be glad to have you," he said. "Clara Martin is well regarded in town. Her boarding house is one of the best establishments in Jordan Valley." "You know her?" Hannah asked. "I take meals there sometimes when I have business in town," Marcus said. "She is a fine cook and a good woman. You will be happy with her, I think." "I hope so," Hannah said softly. "I need to find work, establish myself. I cannot impose on her charity indefinitely." "What sort of work are you qualified for?" Mr. Patterson asked. "I am a governess by training, but there are not many families in need of one out here, I imagine. I can read and write, do sums, some bookkeeping. I can sew and cook, though I am not exceptional at either." Hannah listed her accomplishments with a sinking feeling. What use were such skills in a rough frontier town? "The new school teacher just quit and went back east," Mrs. Patterson said suddenly. "Could not handle the isolation," she said. "The town has been looking for a replacement." Hannah's heart leaped. "A school teacher, do you think they would consider me?" "I do not see why not if you have the education for it," Mr. Patterson said. "Marcus, you are on the school board, are you not?" Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes on Hannah. "I am. We have been looking for someone for the past 3 weeks. The children are just running wild without proper instruction. If you are interested, Miss Bellamy, I could arrange for you to meet with the other board members." "I would be very interested," Hannah said, feeling a flutter of hope for the first time in months. A teaching position would give her independence, purpose, a way to support herself without relying on charity. "Very interested indeed." "Then we will see to it," Marcus said, and the warmth in his eyes made Hannah's breath catch. After supper, Mrs. Patterson insisted that Hannah retire early, and she was too exhausted to argue. The room she was given was small but clean, with a comfortable bed and more quilts piled on top. She sank into the mattress with a sigh of relief, her body aching from her ordeal but her mind racing. She thought about the man who had saved her, Marcus Connor. There was something about him that drew her, something beyond gratitude for the rescue. He had been so calm in the face of danger, so capable and strong, but there had been gentleness in the way he handled her, a kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She had never met a man quite like him before. The men she had known in Boys City had been soft city dwellers, merchants and bankers and their spoiled sons. Marcus was different, forged by harder circumstances, shaped by a land that demanded strength and resilience. Yet he had not been hardened by it. There was something almost tender in the way he had held her on the ride to the ranch, in the concern he had shown for her welfare. Hannah fell asleep thinking about sage green eyes and a quiet voice saying, "I have got you. You are safe now." She woke to sunshine streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure of where she was, and then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up carefully, testing her limbs. Everything still ached, but it was a manageable pain, and the warmth and rest had restored her strength considerably. Mrs. Patterson had left a dress on the chair by the door, along with fresh undergarments. The dress was simple calico, a bit worn but clean and mended with careful stitches. It was too big in some places and too small in others, but it would do until Hannah could retrieve her things or purchase new ones. When she made her way downstairs, she found Marcus and Mr. Patterson at the table, deep in conversation about cattle prices and water rights. They both stood when she entered, and Marcus pulled out a chair for her. "You have more color in your face this morning," he observed. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you," Hannah said. "A bit sore, but nothing I cannot manage. Good." "I rode down to check your wagon at first light," Marcus said, and Hannah's heart sank at the expression on his face. "I am afraid it is a total loss. The frame is cracked beyond repair, and most of your belongings were scattered and ruined by the rain. I salvaged what I could." He gestured to a small pile of items on the sideboard. Her carpet bag, water-stained but intact. A few books that might be salvageable if dried carefully. A wooden box containing her mother's jewelry, and her purse with what little money she had left. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Thank you for retrieving that much. The jewelry was my mother's. I would have hated to lose it." "I figured as much," Marcus said gently. "The box looked important, Mrs. Patterson bustled over with a plate heaped with breakfast and set it in front of Hannah. "Eat," she commanded. "You need your strength. We have a busy day ahead of us." "We do?" Hannah asked. "Of course. We need to get you to town, get you settled with your aunt, and Marcus needs to arrange that meeting with the school board." Mrs. Patterson ticked off items on her fingers. "No time to waste." "I can take Miss Bellamy to town in my wagon," Mr. Patterson offered. "I need to pick up supplies anyway." But Marcus shook his head. "I will take her. I need to speak with Clara anyway about another matter, and it makes sense for me to introduce Miss Bellamy to the school board members directly." Mr. Patterson exchanged a look with his wife that Hannah could not quite interpret, but he nodded agreeably. "Suit yourself. Your horse will have an easier time with two than my old mare anyway." After breakfast, Hannah helped Mrs. Patterson clean up despite the woman's protests, and then it was time to leave. Marcus had hitched his horse to a small wagon he had borrowed from the Pattersons, and he helped Hannah up onto the seat with a hand that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. The road to Jordan Valley was still muddy but passable in daylight, and Marcus drove with the same calm competence he seemed to bring to everything he did. For a while, they rode in comfortable silence, and Hannah found herself studying the landscape. It was beautiful in its own stark way, all rolling hills and vast sky, so different from the more settled areas she had known back east. "You are from the east originally?" Marcus asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Pennsylvania," Hannah confirmed. "Philadelphia. My parents died when I was 17, and I had to find work. A family needed a governess, so I trained for it. I have been moving from position to position ever since." "That must be hard, never really having a home of your own," Marcus said. Hannah looked at him in surprise. Most people did not understand that particular loneliness, but he seemed to. "It is," she admitted. "I always feel like a guest, never quite belonging anywhere. I am hoping Jordan Valley might be different." "It could be," Marcus said. "It is a good town, full of good people. If you give it a chance, it might surprise you." "Is this where you are from?" Hannah asked. "No, I am from Texas originally. Came out here about 5 years ago looking for a fresh start." His jaw tightened slightly. Sometimes a man needs to leave his past behind. Hannah wanted to ask what he was running from, but the set of his shoulders told her the subject was closed. Everyone had secrets, things they did not talk about. She of all people understood that. "Well, I am very glad you did come to Oregon," she said instead. Otherwise, I might be at the bottom of that mud pit right now." Marcus glanced at her and his expression softened. "I am glad I found you when I did. When I saw you in that mud, so determined not to give up, I thought you must be the bravest woman I had ever seen." "Brave." Hannah laughed, though it came out shakier than she intended. "I was terrified." "Bravery is not the absence of fear," Marcus said. "It is continuing on despite it. You were afraid, but you kept fighting. That is courage." No one had ever called Hannah brave before. She had been called difficult, stubborn, too outspoken, too independent, but never brave. The word settled over her like a warm cloak, and she found herself sitting a little straighter. Jordan Valley came into view as they crested a hill, a small town nestled in a valley with a river running through it. There was a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above them, and houses scattered on the outskirts. It was modest but tidy, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. "That is the boarding house there," Marcus said, pointing to a two-story building with a fresh coat of white paint and a wide front porch. "Your aunt's place." As they pulled up in front, the door opened and a woman emerged. She was in her late 40s, with Hannah's same dark hair streaked with gray, and a face that broke into a wide smile when she saw them. "Hannah," she called, hurrying down the steps. "Oh, my dear girl, I have been so worried. When you did not arrive yesterday, I feared something had happened." "Something did happen," Hannah said as Marcus helped her down from the wagon. "My wagon overturned in the storm, but Mr. Connor rescued me." Clara's eyes went wide. "Good heavens, are you all right?" "I am fine, Aunt Clara, thanks to Mr. Connor and the Pattersons who gave me shelter." Clara turned to Marcus and took his hands in hers. "Marcus Connor, I do not know how to thank you. If anything had happened to Hannah, I would never have forgiven myself for asking her to come all this way." "No thanks necessary, Miss Clara," Marcus said. "I am just glad I happened along when I did, and I was hoping I might impose on you for a moment. Miss Bellamy mentioned she was looking for employment, and it occurs to me that she might be qualified for the teaching position the town needs to fill." Clara's eyes lit up. "A teacher? Hannah, is this true? Do you have the education for it?" "I was a governess," Hannah explained. "I taught children reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography. I am not formally trained as a teacher, but I have experience." "That is more than our last teacher had," Clara said. "She had a certificate but no practical experience, and she could not manage the older boys at all." "Marcus, can you arrange a meeting?" "I can. In fact, I was thinking we might go see Reverend Walsh right now if Miss Bellamy is not too tired. He is the head of the school board, and if he approves, the rest of us will follow his lead." Hannah's heart was pounding. This was happening so fast, but she was not about to let the opportunity slip away. "I am not too tired. I would be happy to meet with him." "Wonderful," Clara said. "But first, let me at least give you a cup of tea and let you freshen up. You cannot meet the Reverend looking like you have been through a storm." She ushered Hannah inside, leaving Marcus to tie up his horse. The boarding house was as neat and welcoming inside as it appeared outside, with polished wood floors and lace curtains in the windows. Clara led Hannah upstairs to a small room that she said would be hers for as long as she needed it. "No charge," Clara said when Hannah tried to protest. "You are family, and family helps each other. Besides, if you get this teaching position, you will be able to pay your own way soon enough." She left Hannah alone to wash her face and hands in the basin provided, and Hannah took a moment to study herself in the small mirror on the wall. She looked pale and tired, her hair still somewhat wild from yesterday's ordeal, but there was a determination in her eyes that had not been there before. She was done being pushed around by circumstance. She was going to make a life for herself here, a good life, and no one was going to tell her she could not when she came back downstairs, Marcus was waiting, hat in hand. He had cleaned up as well, she noticed, and he looked at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Hannah confirmed. The church was just down the street, a simple wooden structure with a cross on top. Reverend Walsh was a portly man with a kind face and gentle eyes, and he welcomed them into his small office with genuine warmth. "Miss Bellamy," he said after Marcus had made the introductions, "Marcus tells me you might be interested in our teaching position." "Very interested," Hannah said, and then she launched into a description of her experience and qualifications. She told him about the families she had worked for, the subjects she had taught, her methods for maintaining discipline while still making learning enjoyable. She spoke with passion about the importance of education, especially for children who might not otherwise have access to it. Reverend Walsh listened carefully, nodding occasionally, and when she finished, he sat back in his chair and studied her. "Miss Bellamy, I will be frank with you. Our last teacher left because she found the work too demanding and the children too unruly. We have 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 15, all in one room. The older boys can be quite challenging, and some of the parents can be difficult as well. It is not an easy position." "I understand," Hannah said, "but I am not afraid of hard work and I am not easily intimidated." "I believe I can handle it." Reverend Walsh smiled. "I believe you can too. Marcus, what do you think?" "I think Miss Bellamy is exactly what this town needs," Marcus said, and the confidence in his voice made Hannah's cheeks warm. "She has proven she is capable of facing difficult circumstances with courage and determination. I believe she will be an excellent teacher." "Then it is settled," Reverend Walsh said, standing and offering Hannah his hand. "Welcome to Jordan Valley, Miss Bellamy. You can start on Monday." "That gives you 3 days to prepare." Hannah shook his hand, hardly able to believe it. She had a job, a real position with a salary and a purpose. "Thank you, Reverend Walsh. I will not let you down." "I am certain you will not," he said warmly. "Marcus, thank you for bringing Miss Bellamy to my attention. You have done the town a great service." As they walked back to the boarding house, Hannah felt as though she were floating. "I cannot believe that just happened," she said. "Yesterday I thought my life was over, and today I have a teaching position." "You earned it," Marcus said. "You impressed Reverend Walsh, and that is not an easy thing to do." "I could not have done it without you," Hannah said, stopping to look at him directly. "You saved my life yesterday, and today you helped me start a new one. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Marcus shook his head. "There is nothing to repay. I did what anyone would have done." "No," Hannah said firmly. "Not anyone. You went out of your way to help me, a complete stranger. You took me to safety, made sure I was cared for, retrieved my belongings, brought me to town, and arranged this meeting. That is far beyond what most people would do." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I suppose I just could not stand the thought of you needing help and not receiving it," he said finally. "When I saw you yesterday, stuck in that mud, looking so scared but so determined, something just stirred in me. I had to help you." There was something in the way he said it, an intensity that made Hannah's breath catch. They stood there on the boardwalk, people passing around them, and for a moment it felt as though they were the only two people in the world. "Well," Hannah said softly, "I am very glad you did. You lifted me when I could not stand, and I will never forget that." "You lifted me when I could not stand," Marcus repeated quietly, as if testing the words. "I like that. It is more than just the mud, is it not?" "What do you mean?" Hannah asked. "I mean you were drowning in more than mud yesterday. You had lost your position, been turned out with almost nothing, your wagon had overturned, and you were stranded in a storm. You had every reason to give up, but you did not. And watching you refuse to surrender, watching you fight for your life with everything you had, it reminded me why I came out here in the first place." "Why did you come out here?" Hannah asked, emboldened by his openness. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "I was a different man back in Texas," he said finally. "Angry, reckless, always looking for a fight. I got into some trouble, nothing I am proud of, and I realized I had a choice. Keep going down that path and end up dead or in prison, or start over somewhere new and become the man I wanted to be instead of the man I was raised to be." "And have you?" Hannah asked. "Become the man you wanted to be?" "I am trying," Marcus said. "Every day I am trying. And yesterday, pulling you out of that mud, seeing the gratitude and hope in your eyes, I felt like maybe I was succeeding. Maybe I really had become someone who could help instead of harm." Hannah reached out without thinking and took his hand. "You are a good man, Marcus Connor. Whatever you were before, you are a good man now." His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he looked at her with an expression that made her heart race. "Thank you," he said roughly. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." They stood there, hands clasped, until a wagon rattled past and broke the spell. Marcus released her hand reluctantly, and they continued walking back to the boarding house. Clara was waiting on the porch, and when she saw their faces, she broke into a wide smile. "You got the position, did you not?" "I did," Hannah said, still hardly believing it. "I start on Monday." "Wonderful. This calls for a celebration. Marcus, you will stay for supper, will you not?" Marcus hesitated, and Hannah found herself holding her breath, hoping he would say yes. "I should not impose," he began, but Clara waved him off. "Nonsense. It is the least we can do after everything you have done for Hannah. Besides, I have a roast in the oven that is far too big for just the boarders and me." "In that case, I would be honored," Marcus said, and the smile he gave Hannah made her knees weak. Supper that evening was a lively affair. Clara's boarding house was home to 5 other residents at the moment. An older couple named the Hendersons who ran the general store, a young clerk named Timothy who worked at the bank, a widow named Mrs. Green who did sewing and alterations, and a traveling salesman named Mr. Porter who was just passing through. They were all curious about Hannah, and full of questions about her ordeal and her new position. Marcus sat beside Hannah at the long table, and she was acutely aware of his presence, the way his arm occasionally brushed hers, the sound of his quiet laughter at Mr. Henderson's jokes. She noticed that the other women at the table kept glancing between them with knowing smiles, and she felt her cheeks flush. After supper, Clara shooed everyone else away and insisted on cleaning up herself, clearly giving Hannah and Marcus some time alone. They ended up on the front porch in the gathering dusk, sitting on the steps and watching the town settle in for the night. "It is beautiful here," Hannah said. "So peaceful." "It can be," Marcus agreed, "though winter is hard and summers get hotter than you might expect. But there is something about this place that gets into your blood. I never want to leave." "I think I understand that," Hannah said. "I have only been here a few hours, but already it feels different from anywhere else I have been. It feels like I could belong here." "You do belong here," Marcus said with quiet certainty. "I knew that the moment I saw you. You have the kind of strength this land requires." "I do not feel strong," Hannah admitted. "Most of the time I feel like I am barely holding on." "That is exactly what I mean," Marcus said. "Real strength is not never being afraid or never struggling. It is holding on when you have every reason to let go. You have that, Hannah. I saw it yesterday." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made her shiver despite the warm evening air. "You see me more clearly than anyone ever has," she said softly. "How is that possible when we just met?" "I do not know," Marcus said. "But I feel like I have known you much longer than a day, Is that foolish? If it is, then we are both fools, Hannah said, because I feel the same way. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and companionable, and Hannah thought about how strange life was. 24 hours ago, she had been certain she was going to die. Now she had a home, a job, and sitting beside her was a man who made her feel things she had never felt before, things she had not believed herself capable of feeling. I should go, Marcus said finally, though he did not sound like he wanted to. It is a long ride back to my ranch and I should get there before full dark. Will I see you again? Hannah asked, trying to keep the hope out of her voice and failing. Marcus turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were very serious. You will see me again, he promised. I take meals here at least once a week, and I will be coming to town more often now that I have a reason to. A reason, Hannah whispered. You, Marcus said simply. You are my reason. He stood and offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet. For a moment they stood very close, and Hannah thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to, she realized with a shock. She wanted it very much. But Marcus was a gentleman, and they had only just met, so he simply raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Hannah Bellamy, he said. I will see you soon. Good night, Marcus Connor, she replied, and she stood on the porch watching until his wagon disappeared into the darkness. When she went inside, Clara was waiting with a knowing smile. That is a good man, Hannah. One of the best I have known. I am starting to realize that, Hannah said. He has been alone too long, Clara continued. He works too hard, keeps to himself too much. I have worried about him, but tonight I saw something different in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Happiness. You have done that for him. I have not done anything, Hannah protested. You have given him a reason to come to town more often, Clara said. Trust me, that is something. Marcus Connor is not a man who does things without purpose. If he says he will be back, he will be back. Hannah went to bed that night with her mind full of Marcus. She thought about the way he had pulled her from the mud, strong and sure and unafraid. She thought about the way he had held her on the ride to the Pattersons, making her feel safe when she had been certain she would never feel safe again. She thought about the way he looked at her, like she was someone special, someone worth knowing. She had never believed in love at first sight. She had always thought such things were the stuff of novels, not real life. But now she was not so sure. What else could explain this pull she felt toward Marcus, this sense of recognition, of rightness? It was too soon, too fast, and yet it felt more real than anything she had ever experienced. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Hannah spent time at the schoolhouse, a one-room building on the edge of town, taking inventory of what supplies were available and planning her lessons. The previous teacher had left the place in disarray, with books scattered and slates unwashed, but Hannah threw herself into organizing it with a will. Clara helped her sew 2 new dresses from fabric purchased at the general store, practical calico in dark colors that would not show dirt. Mrs. Henderson from the store donated some hair ribbons and a shawl, and Mrs. Green altered one of her own skirts to fit Hannah. The kindness of these strangers turned friends overwhelmed her, but Clara just laughed. This is what we do out here, she said. We take care of each other. When winter comes and someone needs help, we all pitch in. That is how we survive. On Sunday, Hannah attended church services and was introduced to many of the families whose children she would be teaching. They were a mix of ranchers, shopkeepers, and tradesmen, hard-working people with weathered faces and cautious eyes. But when they learned she was the new teacher, they welcomed her warmly. Marcus was there too, sitting in the back pew, and Hannah's heart leaped when she saw him. He looked different in clean clothes with his hair combed, almost uncomfortable, like a wild thing forced into captivity. But when their eyes met across the church, He smiled, and Hannah felt warmth spread through her chest. After the service, he made his way through the crowd to her side. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Very well," Hannah said. "Everyone has been so kind. I have been working on the schoolhouse, getting it ready for tomorrow." "I heard you have been working from dawn to dusk," Marcus said. "You need to pace yourself. You do not want to exhaust yourself before you even start." "I am fine," Hannah assured him. "I am excited, that is all. I want to do a good job." "You will," Marcus said with confidence. "The children are lucky to have you." He stayed by her side as she met more townspeople, quietly supportive, occasionally interjecting a comment or answering a question when someone seemed hesitant. Hannah realized that his presence was lending her credibility, that his approval meant something to these people. They trusted him, and because he trusted her, they were willing to give her a chance. After everyone had dispersed, Marcus walked Hannah back to the boarding house. It was a beautiful spring day, warm and clear, and the whole valley seemed to be blooming. "Would you like to go for a ride this afternoon?" Marcus asked as they reached the porch. "I could show you some of the area, let you get your bearings. It is important for you to know the land around here." "I would like that very much," Hannah said, her pulse quickening at the thought of spending more time alone with him. "Good. I will come by in about an hour. Wear something practical. The trail can be rough in places." He was true to his word, arriving precisely an hour later with 2 horses. One of them, a gentle mare that he assured Hannah was very calm and easy to ride. She had some experience with horses from her time as a governess, teaching children to ride, but it had been a while, and she was grateful for the mare's placid temperament. Marcus led them out of town at an easy pace, heading north toward his ranch. He pointed out landmarks as they rode: the river where people fished in the summer, the hills where cattle grazed, the places where wildflowers would bloom in a few weeks. He told her about the harsh winters and the hot summers, about the challenges of ranching in this country and the rewards that made it worthwhile. "It is not an easy life," he said, "but it is an honest one. You work hard and you see the results of your labor. There is something satisfying about that." "What made you choose ranching?" Hannah asked. "You could have done anything when you came out here." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "I wanted something that required every bit of strength I had," he said finally. "Something that would be so demanding that I would not have time to fall back into old habits. Ranching did that for me. It made me focus on something other than my anger, other than the past. It saved me in a way." "Tell me about the past," Hannah said gently. "What were you so angry about?" Marcus sighed, and for a moment she thought he might not answer. But then he began to speak, his voice low and steady. "My father was a hard man," he said. "He believed the only way to make a man strong was to beat the weakness out of him. My mother died when I was young, and after that, there was no softness in our house, no kindness, just hard work and harder punishments. I grew up believing that the world was a cruel place and that the only way to survive was to be crueler." "Marcus," Hannah whispered, aching for the boy he had been. "I got into fights, lots of them," he continued. "I drank too much, said things I should not have said, hurt people who did not deserve it. And then one day I nearly killed a man in a bar fight. He had insulted me and I just saw red. If my friends had not pulled me off him, I would have beaten him to death." He paused, his jaw tight with the memory. "That was when I realized I had become my father. I was the thing I hated most in the world, so I left. I took what little money I had saved and I came out here and I swore I would be different, I would be better." "And you are," Hannah said. "You are nothing like the man you just described. You are kind and gentle and good." "I try to be," Marcus said. "Every day I try. But sometimes I still feel that anger, that darkness. It is always there, just under the surface. I worry that one day it will come out again." Hannah reached over and touched his arm, making him look at her. "We all have darkness inside us, Marcus. What matters is what we choose to do with it. You have chosen to fight it, to be better than your past. That takes courage." "You keep saying I am courageous," Marcus said, "but I think you are the brave one. You face the world alone with nothing but your own strength to rely on, and you do not flinch. That is true courage." "Then perhaps we are both brave," Hannah said softly. "Perhaps we can be brave together." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, something fierce and tender all at once. "I would like that," he said. "I would like that very much." They rode in silence for a while, a companionable quiet that needed no words. When they reached a small creek, Marcus suggested they stop and rest the horses. He helped Hannah dismount, his hands steady on her waist, and they sat together on a fallen log near the water. "This is beautiful," Hannah said, watching the water dance over the rocks. "It is one of my favorite spots," Marcus said. "I come here when I need to think, when the ranch gets to be too much. There is something peaceful about it." "I can see why," Hannah said. She turned to look at him, studying his profile in the afternoon light. He was not a handsome man in the classical sense, but there was something compelling about him, something that drew her like a magnet. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said. "Why did you help me, really? You said you saw me in the mud and you had to help, but why? You did not know me. You did not owe me anything." Marcus turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I have asked myself that same question," he said. "And the only answer I can come up with is that the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. You were fighting so hard to survive, refusing to give up even when you had every reason to, and I thought, here is someone who understands what it is to struggle, what it is to refuse to surrender. And I knew I had to save you, because maybe in saving you, I would save something in myself too." "Did you?" Hannah whispered. "Save something in yourself?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "You reminded me why I fight so hard to be better, because there are people in this world worth being better for, people like you." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." "Then no one has ever really seen you before," Marcus said. He reached up and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "But I see you, Hannah Bellamy. I see your strength and your courage and your heart. And I think you are extraordinary." "I think you are extraordinary too," Hannah said, her voice shaking slightly. They sat there, close enough that Hannah could feel the warmth of Marcus's body, could smell the scent of leather and soap and something uniquely him. She thought he might kiss her, and this time she was certain she would let him. But Marcus was still a gentleman, and the moment passed. "We should head back," he said, though he sounded reluctant. "It will be dark soon, and you need to rest before your first day of teaching tomorrow." The ride back to town was quieter, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they reached the boarding house, Marcus helped her down from the mare and held her hands for a long moment. "Good luck tomorrow," he said. "Though I know you will not need it, you are going to be a wonderful teacher." "Thank you," Hannah said, "for everything, for the ride, for showing me your beautiful country, for sharing your story with me. It means more than you know." "It is I who should be thanking you," Marcus said. "You have given me something I did not even know I was missing." "What is that?" Hannah asked. "Hope," Marcus said simply. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Hannah standing on the porch with her heart full of emotions she did not quite know how to name. Her first day of teaching dawned bright and clear, and Hannah woke with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Clara made her a hearty breakfast and packed her a lunch, fussing over her like a mother hen until Hannah laughed and promised she would be fine. The schoolhouse was already full when she arrived, children of all ages sitting on the rough benches, eyeing her with curiosity. Some looked eager, some looked skeptical, and the older boys in the back looked downright hostile. Hannah took a deep breath, smoothed her skirt, and stepped up to the front of the room. "Good morning," she said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Miss Bellamy, and I am your new teacher. I know some of you are wondering if I will be any good at this job, or if I will run away like the last teacher did. Well, I can promise you this: I do not run away. No matter how hard you make it for me, I will be here every day, ready to teach anyone who wants to learn." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now, I know some of you do not want to be here. You would rather be home helping with chores or out playing. I understand that. But let me tell you something about education. It is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. You can lose money, lose land, lose everything you own, but what is in your head, what you have learned, that is yours forever. And I am going to make sure that what you learn here is worth remembering." The children stared at her, silent, and Hannah thought she saw a few nods of approval. Even the older boys in the back looked slightly less hostile. "Now," she said, picking up a piece of chalk, "let us begin." The day was challenging, exhausting, and absolutely wonderful. The children tested her, of course, seeing how far they could push before she pushed back. But Hannah had dealt with spoiled, aristocratic children who thought they ruled the world. A few frontier children were nothing she could not handle. She was firm but fair, demanding their attention and their best effort, but also making lessons interesting with stories and examples drawn from their own lives. When one of the older boys, a lanky 15-year-old named Jake, tried to disrupt the class with rude comments, she put him to work helping the younger children with their arithmetic, a task he grumbled about but eventually seemed to enjoy. By the end of the day, she was tired but triumphant. Several parents stopped by to pick up their children and stayed to tell her they had heard good things, that their children had actually enjoyed school for the first time in months. Hannah accepted their praise with quiet pleasure, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in a long time. She was cleaning the schoolhouse, humming to herself, when the door opened and Marcus walked in. Her heart leaped at the sight of him. "I heard your first day was a success," he said, smiling. "Word travels fast," Hannah said. "This is a small town." "Everyone knows everything by supper time," Marcus said. He looked around the tidy schoolhouse with approval. "You have done well here. It looks better than it has in years." "Thank you," Hannah said. "What brings you to town?" "You," Marcus said honestly. "I wanted to see how your first day went, and to ask if you might have supper with me tomorrow evening. There is a hotel restaurant in town that serves decent food. Nothing fancy, but respectable." Hannah's pulse quickened. "Are you asking to court me, Marcus Connor?" "I suppose I am," Marcus said, meeting her eyes steadily. "If you are amenable to being courted." "I am very amenable," Hannah said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I would be happy to have supper with you tomorrow." The smile that broke across Marcus's face was like the sun coming out. "Tomorrow evening, then." 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, Hannah confirmed. He left shortly after, but Hannah could hardly concentrate on her work for the rest of the evening. She kept thinking about the way he had looked at her, the happiness in his eyes when she had agreed to supper. She felt like a young girl with her first beau, giddy and excited and a little bit scared. Clara was delighted when Hannah told her about the invitation. "I knew it," she crowed. "I knew he was courting you. Oh, Hannah, this is wonderful. Marcus needs someone like you, and you need someone like him." "We barely know each other," Hannah protested, though her heart was not in the argument. "Some people know each other for years and never really see each other," Clara said. "Others meet and know immediately that they are meant to be together. I think you and Marcus are the latter." Hannah suspected her aunt was right, but it was still terrifying to feel so much so quickly. She had never been in love before, had never even come close. What if she was no good at it? What if she disappointed him? But then she remembered Marcus's words. Real strength is holding on when you have every reason to let go. She had faced down death in that mud pit, had pulled herself up and started a new life with nothing but determination and grit. Surely she could face the possibility of love with the same courage. The next day at school went even better than the first. The children were settling into routines, responding to her expectations, and she could see progress already in their reading and writing. Several of the older boys who had been the most resistant were starting to come around, drawn in by her refusal to give up on them. When 6 o'clock came, Hannah was dressed in her best dress, one of the new ones Clara had helped her sew, and waiting on the porch. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it, but when Marcus appeared, looking nervous and proud in clean clothes with his hat in his hand, all her anxiety melted away. He offered her his arm, and they walked the short distance to the hotel restaurant. The place was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and oil lamps providing warm light. Marcus pulled out her chair for her, and they ordered the special, roast chicken with potatoes and vegetables. At first they made small talk, discussing her school day and his ranch work, but gradually the conversation deepened. Marcus asked her about her childhood, her parents, what she had dreamed of becoming before circumstances forced her into service. Hannah found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, and he listened with an attention that made her feel valued. In turn, Marcus told her more about his life in Texas, about his younger brother who had taken over the family ranch and was, by all accounts, making a success of it without resorting to their father's brutal methods. He talked about the friends he had made in Oregon, the community he had built, the life he was creating for himself. "I always thought I would be alone," he said, stirring his coffee absently. "I figured that was the price I had to pay for my past, for the man I had been. But then I met you, and for the first time I can imagine a different future, one where I am not alone." "I know what you mean," Hannah said softly. "I have spent the last 5 years moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere, never having anyone of my own. But here, with you, I feel like I have finally found where I am supposed to be." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Hannah, I know it is too soon to say certain things. We have only known each other a week. But I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not playing games or passing time. I am courting you because I believe you might be the woman I have been waiting for all my life." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "It is terrifying and wonderful all at once." "Then we will be terrified and wonderful together," Marcus said, and Hannah laughed through her tears. They stayed at the restaurant long after they had finished eating, talking and laughing and learning each other. When they finally left, Marcus walked her back to the boarding house slowly, as if reluctant for the evening to end. On the porch, he took both her hands in his and looked down at her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. "May I call on you again?" he asked formally. "You may call on me as often as you like," Hannah said. This time, Marcus did not hesitate. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Hannah did not want to. She tilted her face up to his, and when his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope, and when they finally pulled apart, Hannah felt dizzy with happiness. "Good night, Hannah," Marcus whispered. "Good night, Marcus," she replied, and she stood on the porch watching him walk away, her fingers pressed to her lips where she could still feel the warmth of his kiss. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Hannah threw herself into her teaching, finding satisfaction in watching her students learn and grow. She established herself as a respected member of the community, someone who could be relied upon to keep her commitments and do her job well. And every few days, Marcus would appear. Sometimes he would come to town on business and stop by the schoolhouse to walk her home. Sometimes he would take her on rides into the countryside, showing her more of the beautiful land he loved. And sometimes they would simply sit on the porch of the boarding house in the evening, talking and laughing and slowly falling deeper in love. Because that was what was happening, Hannah realized. She was falling in love with Marcus Connor, and he was falling in love with her. It was not the sudden, dramatic passion of novels. It was something quieter, deeper, built on conversation and shared experiences and a growing understanding of who they each were at their core. Marcus was patient and kind, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give, but his feelings were clear in every look, every touch, every word. He brought her wildflowers picked from the hills near his ranch. He fixed a broken step at the schoolhouse without being asked. He listened to her concerns about difficult students and offered advice without condescension. And Hannah found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone before. She told him about her fears and her dreams, about the loneliness she had felt all these years, about her determination to make something of herself despite having started with so little. And Marcus understood, because he had been there himself. One evening in early May, about 6 weeks after they had met, Marcus took Hannah on a picnic up in the hills overlooking the valley. It was a beautiful spot, with a view that stretched for miles, and the wildflowers were in full bloom, carpeting the hills in blue and yellow and purple. They ate the food Clara had packed for them and talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence. When they finished eating, Marcus stood and offered Hannah his hand. "Walk with me," he said. They walked through the flowers, their hands clasped, until they reached a large flat rock that jutted out over the valley. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "This is where I come when I need to remember why I stay," Marcus said. "This view, this peace, this beauty. It reminds me that there is good in the world worth fighting for." "It is breathtaking," Hannah agreed. Marcus turned to face her, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. "Hannah, I need to tell you something and I need you to hear me out before you respond. Can you do that?" Hannah nodded, her heart beginning to race. "I love you," Marcus said simply. "I know it has only been 6 weeks and I know people will say it is too soon, but I do not care. I love you, Hannah Bellamy. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you refuse to give up, the way you face every challenge with determination. I love the sound of your laugh and the way your eyes light up when you talk about your students. I love everything about you and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling so wide her face hurt. "Are you finished?" she asked. "Not quite," Marcus said. He took a deep breath and sank down on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Hannah Bellamy, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a reformed man who wants nothing more than to make you happy? Will you let me love you for the rest of our lives?" Hannah pulled him to his feet and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes. I love you too, Marcus. I have loved you almost from the moment I met you, and I would be honored to be your wife." Marcus lifted her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not elaborate or expensive, but it was beautiful. "It was my mother's," Marcus said as he slipped it onto Hannah's finger. "The only thing of hers I kept. I have been carrying it with me for years, waiting for the right woman, and now I have found her." Hannah looked down at the ring, then up at Marcus, and her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. "I never thought I would have this," she whispered. "I never thought anyone would love me like this." "Then you underestimated yourself," Marcus said. "You are very easy to love, Hannah Connor." "Hannah Connor," she repeated, testing out the sound of her new name. "I like that." They stayed on the hilltop until the sun had fully set and the stars began to appear, making plans for their future. They would marry in June, just a month away. Hannah would continue teaching until the end of the school term in August, and then she would move to Marcus's ranch. They would build a life together, have children if they were blessed with them, grow old watching the sun set over this beautiful valley. When they finally rode back to town, they went straight to the boarding house to tell Clara the news. She burst into tears and hugged them both, declaring that she knew it would happen and that she had never been so happy in her life. "You two are perfect for each other," she said, wiping her eyes. "Just perfect." Word of the engagement spread through town quickly, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. The townspeople had watched Marcus and Hannah's courtship with approval, and they were delighted to hear about the upcoming wedding. Several women offered to help with the preparations, and Reverend Walsh agreed to perform the ceremony. The next month passed in a whirlwind of activity. Hannah continued teaching, but her evenings and weekends were filled with wedding preparations. Clara helped her sew a wedding dress, simple but elegant, in ivory silk that Clara had been saving for years. Mrs. Henderson donated lace for the veil, and Mrs. Green did the alterations for free. Marcus came to town every chance he got, though he was busy preparing the ranch house for Hannah's arrival. He built new furniture for the bedroom and fixed all the things that had been broken or worn. He wanted everything to be perfect for his bride. On the Saturday before the wedding, there was a party at the schoolhouse, a community celebration of the upcoming marriage. The townspeople brought food and music, and there was dancing and laughter late into the evening. Hannah stood with Marcus's arm around her waist and looked at all these people who had become her friends, her family, in just a few short months. She felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. "What is wrong?" Marcus asked, concerned. "Nothing," Hannah said, smiling through her tears. "Everything is right. For the first time in my life, everything is exactly right." The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful, with a clear blue sky and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers. Hannah dressed in her wedding gown with Clara's help, her hands shaking with excitement and nerves. "You look beautiful," Clara said, adjusting the veil. "Marcus is a very lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Hannah said. "He saved my life in more ways than one." The church was packed with people when Hannah arrived, and there was Marcus at the front, looking handsome and nervous in his best suit. When he saw her, his face lit up with such love and joy that Hannah thought she might float right up to the ceiling. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony with warmth and dignity, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Hannah with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and the church bells rang out in celebration. The reception was held at the boarding house, with tables set up in the yard and more food than Hannah had ever seen in one place. There was dancing and toasting and well-wishing, and Hannah felt like the happiest woman in the world. She danced with Marcus, with Mr. Patterson, with Reverend Walsh, with all the men who had welcomed her into their community. As the sun began to set, Marcus pulled Hannah aside. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked. "Home," Hannah repeated, loving the sound of it. "Yes, I am ready." They said their goodbyes and climbed into Marcus's wagon, which had been decorated with flowers and ribbons by the women of the town. As they drove away, people threw rice and cheered, and Hannah waved until they were out of sight. The ride to the ranch was quiet and peaceful, both of them content just to be together. When the house came into view, Hannah caught her breath. It was not large or fancy, but it was well built and sturdy, with a wide porch and windows that glowed with welcoming light. Marcus helped her down from the wagon, and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "I believe this is traditional," he said with a smile, and carried her over the threshold. The inside of the house was warm and cozy, with a fire burning in the fireplace and candles lit everywhere. Marcus set Hannah down gently and took both her hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Connor," he said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Connor," Hannah replied, and then they were kissing, and all the nervousness Hannah had felt melted away. This was right. This was where she was supposed to be. They stood there in front of the fire, holding each other, and Hannah thought about how much her life had changed in just 3 months. She had gone from being stranded in the mud, certain she was going to die, to being held in the arms of a man who loved her, in a home that was now hers, with a future stretching out before her full of possibilities. "You lifted me when I could not stand," she whispered against Marcus's chest. "Not just from the mud, but from the life I was living. You gave me hope and love and a reason to believe in happiness again." Marcus pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "No, Hannah, we lifted each other. I was drowning too, in my past, in my guilt, in my loneliness. And then I found you, and you gave me a reason to believe I could be worthy of love. We saved each other." "Then we are even," Hannah said. "No," Marcus said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "We are just beginning." Their wedding night was everything Hannah had hoped it would be, tender and passionate and full of love. Marcus was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And Hannah gave herself to him completely, without fear or reservation, trusting him with her body as she had already trusted him with her heart. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, Hannah's head on Marcus's chest, his arm around her, and talked about their future. They talked about the children they hoped to have, the life they would build together, the love that would sustain them through whatever challenges came. "I never thought I could be this happy," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought that was for other people, not for someone like me." "You deserve every bit of happiness," Hannah said fiercely. "You are a good man, Marcus Connor, and do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." "I will try to believe that," Marcus said. "Having you helps." "Good," Hannah said. "Because I plan to spend every day of the rest of our lives reminding you." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Hannah dreamed of sunshine and wildflowers and a future full of love. The months that followed were the happiest of Hannah's life. She continued teaching until the end of the school term in August, and Marcus would drive her to town each day and pick her up each evening. She loved her work and her students, but she loved going home to Marcus even more. At the ranch, they fell into a comfortable routine. Hannah learned how to help with the cattle and the horses, how to manage the household, how to cook for a hard-working man who was always hungry. Marcus taught her to ride better, to shoot a rifle for protection, to read the weather and the land. But mostly they just loved each other. They talked for hours about everything under the sun. They laughed together over silly things. They made love with passion and tenderness. They built a marriage that was strong and true, based on mutual respect and deep affection. In September, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Marcus one evening after supper, her hands shaking with excitement and nerves, and he picked her up and spun her around just as he had on the hillside when she had agreed to marry him. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Hannah asked, though she could see that he was. Happy does not begin to cover it, Marcus said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. I am going to be a father. I am going to have a chance to do it right, to be the kind of father I wish I had had. You will be wonderful, Hannah said with certainty. You will be patient and kind and loving, and our children will grow up knowing they are safe and cherished. As her pregnancy progressed, Marcus became even more protective and attentive. He insisted she rest more, do less physical work. He brought her flowers and treats from town. He rubbed her swollen feet in the evening and held her when the pregnancy made her emotional. When she had to stop teaching because of her condition, the townspeople threw her a farewell party and told her how much she had meant to them and their children. Several mothers told her privately that their sons or daughters had learned more in her few months of teaching than in the previous 2 years combined. You will come back after the baby is born, will you not? Mrs. Henderson asked. Hannah hesitated. She loved teaching, but she also loved the idea of being home with her child with Marcus. I do not know, she admitted. I suppose we will see what feels right when the time comes. In May of 1879, exactly 1 year after Hannah and Marcus had become engaged, their son was born. It was a long and difficult labor, and there were moments when Marcus feared he would lose Hannah, but she was as strong in childbirth as she had been in everything else. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in Hannah's arms, Marcus sank down on the bed beside them and wept with relief and joy. He is perfect, Hannah said, exhausted but radiant. Absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas Michael Connor, after Marcus's younger brother and Hannah's father. He had dark hair like his father and his mother's eyes, and from the moment he was born, he had both of them wrapped around his tiny finger. Marcus was a natural father, tender and patient and completely besotted with his son. He would spend hours just holding Thomas, talking to him, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice. He changed diapers without complaint and walked the floor with the baby when he was fussy. Hannah would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love. You are exactly the father I knew you would be, she told him one evening when she found him asleep in the rocking chair with Thomas asleep on his chest. Marcus opened his eyes and smiled at her. I never knew I could love anyone the way I love you, he said. And then this little one came along and somehow my heart got even bigger. Mine too, Hannah said softly. As Thomas grew, the ranch prospered. Marcus was a shrewd businessman and a good rancher, and his herd increased. He hired a few hands to help with the work, which meant he could spend more time with Hannah and Thomas. They expanded the house, adding more bedrooms in anticipation of future children. When Thomas was 2, Hannah became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Clara Connor, after Marcus's mother and Hannah's aunt. Sarah was a quieter baby than Thomas had been, with a serious expression and thoughtful eyes. She seemed to study everything around her with great concentration, and Hannah and Marcus loved her just as fiercely as they loved her brother. Life was not always easy. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, sleepless nights with teething babies and childhood illnesses that scared them both. But through it all, Hannah and Marcus faced each challenge together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. Clara came to visit often, delighting in her great-niece and great-nephew, bringing gifts and laughter and love. The Pattersons became close friends, as did many of the families from town. Hannah did eventually return to teaching part-time when both children were old enough for school themselves. She taught 3 days a week, and Marcus would bring the children to town with him so they could all have lunch together. The townspeople watched the Connor family with approval and affection. They had seen Hannah and Marcus fall in love, had celebrated their wedding, had welcomed their children. The Connors were an integral part of the community now, respected and valued. On a spring evening in 1885, 7 years after Hannah had been pulled from the mud, she and Marcus sat on their porch watching the sunset while Thomas and Sarah played in the yard. Thomas, now 6, was teaching his 4-year-old sister how to skip stones in the water trough, and their laughter drifted across the yard. "You ever think about that day?" Hannah asked suddenly. "The day you found me in the mud, all the time," Marcus said, taking her hand. "It was the day my life truly began." "Mine too," Hannah said. She looked at their children, at the home they had built, at the man beside her who had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and so much more. "You lifted me when I could not stand, Marcus. And I have been standing strong ever since, because I know you will always be there to catch me if I fall." "Always," Marcus promised, kissing her hand. "For the rest of our lives, Hannah, I will always be there." "And I will be there for you," Hannah said. "We will hold each other up, just as we always have." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sun set over the valley. In the distance, they could see the hills where Marcus had proposed, now carpeted in wildflowers. The same hills where they often took the children for picnics, where they told them the story of how their parents had met. Thomas and Sarah would never know hardship the way their parents had. They would grow up secure in their parents' love, confident in their place in the world. They would have opportunities that neither Hannah nor Marcus had dreamed of. And they would know, because their parents told them often, that they were cherished and valued and loved beyond measure. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Marcus called the children inside. They came running, Thomas chattering about the stones he had skipped and Sarah insisting she had skipped more, even though she had not. Marcus scooped up Sarah while Hannah took Thomas's hand, and they all went inside together, a family. Later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Hannah stood at the window looking out at the starlit yard. Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Hannah said. "How blessed. That day when I was stuck in the mud, I was so certain my life was over, and in a way it was. The old Hannah, the woman who drifted from place to place with no roots and no hope, she died that day. And a new Hannah was born, one who had love and purpose and a home. You did not just save my life that day, Marcus. You gave me a life worth living." "You did the same for me," Marcus said, holding her tighter. "I was existing, going through the motions, trying to be better but never really believing I deserved happiness. And then you came into my life, and suddenly I had a reason to hope, a reason to keep striving to be the man I wanted to be. You made me whole, Hannah." Hannah turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "We made each other whole," she said. "And we will continue to do so for the rest of our days." "Promise?" Marcus asked, and despite the 7 years they had been together, there was still a hint of vulnerability in his voice, a fear that this happiness might be taken away. "I promise," Hannah said firmly. "I am not going anywhere, Marcus Connor. You are stuck with me forever." "Forever sounds just about right," Marcus said, and kissed her with all the love and passion and tenderness that still burned as bright as it had on their wedding day. The years continued to pass in happiness and peace. Hannah and Marcus added one more child to their family, a son they named James, who had his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. The ranch continued to prosper, and Marcus became one of the most respected ranchers in the region. Hannah's students went on to successful lives, many of them crediting her with giving them the foundation they needed. Thomas grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over more and more of the work as Marcus aged. Sarah became a teacher herself, following in her mother's footsteps. James, The surprise baby turned out to have a gift for horses and became a sought-after horse trainer. As Hannah and Marcus grew older, their love deepened even further. They faced the challenges of aging together with grace and humor, supporting each other through illness and loss, celebrating the joys of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They became the heart of their family, the center that everyone else orbited around, and their love story became legend in Jordan Valley. People would point them out to visitors. "That is Marcus and Hannah Connor," they would say. He pulled her out of the mud when she was stranded, and they fell in love and have been together ever since. Nearly 50 years now, and they are still as devoted as newlyweds, and it was true. Even after 50 years of marriage, Marcus still looked at Hannah as though she were the most beautiful woman in the world, and Hannah still felt her heart flutter when Marcus walked into a room. They still held hands when they walked. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still made each other laugh until they cried. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge party, with the entire town invited. The church where they had been married was decorated with flowers, and there was food and music and dancing. Marcus and Hannah sat in the place of honor, watching their family and friends celebrate, and they marveled at the life they had built together. 50 years, Hannah said, squeezing Marcus's hand. "Can you believe it? Some days it feels like 50 years, Marcus said with a twinkle in his eye. "And some days it feels like I just pulled you out of that mud yesterday." Hannah laughed. "You are never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," Marcus said. "It is the best thing I ever did." At the end of the evening, after all the guests had gone home and it was just family left, Thomas stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "Who taught me what love really means? Who showed me that marriage is not always easy, but it is always worth it? Who proved that two people from difficult pasts can build a beautiful future together? Thank you for being the example I have tried to follow in my own marriage, and thank you for filling our lives with so much love." There was not a dry eye in the room as everyone raised their glasses and drank to Marcus and Hannah. That night, lying in bed in the same room where they had spent their wedding night 50 years before, Hannah and Marcus held each other close. "I would do it all again," Hannah whispered. "Every bit of it, good and bad, just to end up right here with you." "Me too," Marcus said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah Connor, the very best thing." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done for 50 years. Two souls who had found each other in the mud and had built a love that would last for all eternity. Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 93, with Hannah holding his hand. She was devastated by the loss, but also grateful for the 54 years they had been given together. She lived for another 3 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love story she and Marcus had created. When Hannah died at 90, her family buried her next to Marcus in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley. Their gravestone was simple, inscribed with their names and dates, and one line that Thomas had chosen. "They lifted each other when they could not stand." And in Jordan Valley, Oregon, the story of Marcus and Hannah Connor continued to be told for generations. The story of a cowboy who had saved a woman from the mud and found his own salvation in the process. The story of a woman who had refused to give up and had built a beautiful life from almost nothing. The story of a love that had transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful. Their house still stood on the ranch, now run by their great-great-grandchildren, and visitors would sometimes stop to hear the tale. And always, always, when the wildflowers bloomed on the hills in spring, someone in the Connor family would pick a bouquet and place it on their graves, a reminder that true love never really dies. It just transforms, passing from generation to generation, inspiring others to believe that no matter how stuck in the mud you might be, there is always hope for rescue, for redemption, for love. And somewhere in heaven, or wherever souls go when they leave this earth, Marcus and Hannah Connor were together still, hand in hand, watching over the family and the land they had loved so well, their story complete at last, their love eternal.